Chapter 3486. 1 second remember, love net, providing you with wonderful reading. But before he could dodge, he felt that his hands and feet were bound by something and couldn't move. Not far away, a young man's figure slowly appeared like the wind, controlling the silk thread in his hand to imprison his movements. Bang! A fist hit Enchantress's forehead. He was struck until he saw stars. But it wasn't over yet. At some point in time, the crisp cry of a bird came from the sky. Huge red wings spread out, covering the sky. Enchantress didn't show much surprise or fear when he was so embarrassed before. Now that he heard the bird cry, he raised his head and suddenly opened his eyes wide, saying incredulously, "Is this the divine bird Defying? Who on the floating continent can summon such a divine beast?" Defying, like the water Qilin, was a divine beast infinitely close to the sovereign level. Chirp! Defying screamed, spewed out a ball of flame, and flapped its huge wings. The air seemed to roll up a storm, and the spreading fire directly hit Enchantress's face and body. His body was bound by Ling Yusheng's cloud silk, and he couldn't break free. He could only bear this attack. In an instant, most of his clothes and hair were burned, and even most of his sarcoma was burnt. It was a horrible sight. Enchantress laughed softly. "You little guys are really interesting. What other attacks do you want to show? I really want to continue to see." Before his voice fell, he saw that a crystal-clear long sword had appeared in the hands of the girl playing the zither. "Okay. Then I'll show you. You have to stand still and don't move." The girl's voice was clear and sweet, and the smile on her lips was brighter than the spring sunshine. With her voice, the transparent long sword trembled slightly, and turned into a stream of light flying toward Enchantress. Enchantress's face changed greatly, and his whole body's momentum suddenly broke out. The cloud silk that bound him was broken. Enchantress rolled and crawled several meters to the side, narrowly avoiding the 7 supreme swords that were flying at him. Seeing that the transparent long sword returned to Mu Yan's hand, he breathed a long sigh of relief. He was still in shock, and there was a lingering fear on his face. Mu Yan curls her lips in regret. "I said I wouldn't hide. Miss, the power of your sword far surpasses that of a heavenly divine tool. If I didn't dodge, I would have lost half of my life." Enchantress laughed. After he finished speaking, the smile on his face gradually became sinister and perverse. He raised his voice and said, "It seems that you will not obediently follow me back to see the Grand Tutor?" Mu Yan coldly said, "Yi Chengfeng, we will naturally meet him. Bring your head with us." Hee hee. Hee 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 hee. How many years has it been since I've heard such boasting? Enchantress threw his head back and laughed. As he laughed, his body began to undergo tremendous changes. Except for his hands that had turned into sharp claws. A pair of huge black bone wings extended from his back. His entire face kept stretching and twisting, and his yellowish teeth protruded out, turning into sharp teeth like those of a ferocious beast. The half-burnt sarcoma on his forehead seemed to have something bursting out of his flesh and turned into a black horn. At this moment, the person in front of him could not be called a human at all. On the contrary, he was more like a monster that was neither human nor beast. Uncle Cheng's whole body stiffened and collapsed to the ground. His eyes stared blankly, and he could not even tremble. The blood in his body had frozen. Mobile users, please browse and read. For a better reading experience, please visit Zii. Chapter 3487. 1 second remember love net, providing you with wonderful reading. Only now did he realize that when Enchantress killed the Yin family, he didn't even use 1/1000th of his strength. Uncle Cheng thought that his strength was at most at the peak of the mountain opening stage, slightly higher than his own, and that his magical abilities were far superior to his own. But now, the pressure that this monster exudes, and the spiritual power fluctuations that pervade the air. This was clearly a peak sea-splitting stage expert. Even if the Yin family's patriarch came out, he might not necessarily be her opponent. How could this be? How could Yi Chengfeng have such a terrifying expert under his command? And according to Enchantress, there were 4 such experts, including him. 4 peak sea-splitting stage experts, plus Yi Chengfeng, whose strength was unfathomable. If he wanted to make things difficult for the major sects and families, Uncle Cheng's face was full of horror, almost not daring to think further. Yi Chengfeng secretly cultivated such a force. And then ruthlessly killed everyone who saw it. What was he planning? After Enchantress transformed, the expressions of Mayan and the others became incomparably solemn. "Shao Qi, what state is he in?" Luo Yu hesitated. He seems to have fused with his summoned beast. After a pause, his brows tightly wrinkled. Perhaps his strength has already surpassed the peak of the sea-splitting stage. There was one more sentence that he didn't say. As a summoner, Luo Yu had also studied a lot of books related to this. He had also inadvertently seen this kind of secret method of fusing the body with the summoned beast. Using this kind of secret method, one's strength could indeed increase several times in a short period of time. But the price to pay was also enormous. Luo Yu couldn't figure it out. Would there really be people who would not hesitate to suffer the consequences of eternal damnation in order to pursue temporary strength? But he quickly threw this thought to the back of his mind. Why Yiashin chose this path had nothing to do with him. But now it was obvious that Yiashin was too powerful after fusing with the summoned beast. It was already far beyond the scope of what they could contend against. This little guy really knows a lot. Yiashin's tone was the same as usual, but his voice was rumbling. And when he opened and closed his mouth, there was still bloody saliva stuck between his teeth. The air was filled with a nauseating stench. After so many years on the floating island, this is the first time I've seen a cultivator who gave me such a good impression. Unfortunately, all of you will soon die in my hands. Yiashin slowly raised his sharp claws and said in a deep voice, I'm sorry. In your next life, don't ever set foot on the floating island again. The next moment, the huge monster disappeared. Mu Yan has long been completely engrossed. Seeing Yiashin move, divine hands weave the heavens instantly activated. There was a loud bang in his ear. Mu Yan's internal organs shook violently as if they were overturning rivers and seas, and she almost vomited blood. The few people who were protected by the sound wall were pushed back dozens of meters by the strong wind. Sixth senior sister, are you all right? Mayan doesn't have time to respond to her fellow apprentice's concern. Her fingers quickly strum the Tian Mo Chin. Because Yiashin had attacked again. The inescapable net fell from the sky. This was a derivative skill of musical blade. With Mu Yan's current cultivation, and the repaired, little Shang-Yi string of the Tian Mo Chin, the inescapable net transformed into could cut an ordinary divine tool into pieces. But Yiashin stretched out his black claws and grabbed the air a few times, and directly crushed the inescapable net into pieces. Mobile users, please browse and read. For a better reading experience, please visit Zii. Chapter 3488. Behind Mayan, Leng Yuma and the other three have already used their unique skills. However, the moves that could make Yiashin battered and exhausted before the transformation are all easily resolved by him now. Even the Bai Fang divine beast was sent flying by a single punch and fell unconscious. Yiashin says lightly, in the face of absolute strength, all moves and tricks are just a deathbed struggle. Luo Yu grits her teeth and gets up, a looming white light flashing behind her. Mayan presses his shoulder and says in a deep voice, I'll do it. She knows that Luo Yu is going to use the Baizhe divine beast. But it's not yet. The big brother is in Yi Chengfeng's hands. Di Mingju is not around. They can't even beat a beast slave under Yi Chengfeng, let alone the terrible state preceptor himself. If Luo Yu's identity and the existence of the Baizhe divine beast are exposed now, it is likely to bring disaster to Luo Yu and Liberty City. Mayan raises her hand, and the 7 absolute swords appear in her hand. At the same time, 7 subordinate swords appear behind her. No one is playing, but the sound of the zither is melodious. Then, the second and third Mayan appear. Heavy Phantom, the 3 shadow doppelgangers are launched. One of Mayan's fingers continues to strum on the Tian Mo Chin, displaying the next skill. She shouted, set up the Big Dipper formation. 7 white lights fly out from the Tian Mo Chin and submerge into the bodies of the 7 people. If the big brother and the third brother are here, the Big Dipper formation can exert its greatest power. Now, using the shadow doppelgangers to fill the missing positions is a great consumption for Mayan. But she has no other way. Luo Yu's Baizhe can't be exposed. Her power of law is blocked by Di Mingju and can't be used. Now, she can only fight to the death. Yiashin looks at them with great interest, and finally his eyes fall on Mayan. Your zither and musician skills are not simple. They shouldn't be something from the floating island, right? As he speaks, his fingers tremble slightly. The fingernails fall off and converge into a strangely shaped hook sword. If you can receive my sword, I'll spare your life. As soon as the voice falls, the monster's huge figure has disappeared. Then, an attack with the weight of Mount Tai, mixed with a fishy stench, swept down from the sky. Be careful, junior sister. Out of the way. Mayan's eyes sink, and her grip on the 7 absolute sword tightens. The 7 subordinate swords behind him buzzed and vibrated. There was not the slightest trace of fear in those rippling peach blossom eyes. Instead, a raging battle intent was ignited within them. However, before that terrifying attack could land, a white light flashed across the sky. Then, Yiashin's huge body flew hundreds of meters away and heavily hit the 9-tailed dragon sunflower. Mayan's eyes widen as she stares at the white-clothed youth in front of her. As if he felt her gaze, the young man came back to his senses and revealed a face that was covered with a red scarf, but it couldn't hide his handsome face. Her light pink lips slightly hooked up, her expression bashful and happy. "Mayan, I've finally waited for you." Mu Yan was stunned for a long time before she found her voice. "Li Weiran? Why are you here?" Li Weiran's smile is warm and soft. "I said, I've been waiting for you here." "Waiting for me for what?" Mayan says lightly. "You want me to get something from Tianguang ruins for you? Can you tell me, and I'll go get it for you?" Chapter 3489. 1 second to remember, Love Net, providing you with interesting reading. Li Weiran frowned and said bitterly, "It's been a long time since we last met. Why do we have to talk about these boring topics? In fact, I'm homeless now. I came to seek refuge with you. Mu Yan, can you take me in? I'm good at literature and martial arts. I can cook and work in the hall. I can do anything." With that, he looked at Yi Aishan with a smile that wasn't a smile. "For example, this beast slave. If you want his life, I can give it to you right now." Yi Aishan's expression was solemn. He remembered Yi Qingfeng's words, except for that blind man. Even the Grand Tutor was afraid of him. He couldn't possibly be his opponent. Yi Aishan didn't even think about it. He returned to his original form and fled. "Aya." Li Weiran looked at Yi Aishan's receding figure with interest and chuckled. "It's all Mu Yan's fault that you didn't say anything. What if he ran away?" Mu Yan's mouth twitched. She really couldn't do anything to this pervert. Li Weiran said, "I'm homeless now. Mu Yan, how about you take me in? I can protect you and Xiao Bao. Even if you want to go to the palace and take back your senior, I can help." Mu Yan looks at him coldly. "You watched helplessly as my eldest brother was taken away." She didn't say it as a question, but as an affirmation. Li Weiran chuckled and said faintly, "That's natural. Even if I want to show off, I have to do it in front of Mu Yan. Otherwise, wouldn't it be useless?" Then, his face changed again. "As long as Mu Yan makes a request, no matter how dangerous the palace is, I will help you save him. But, if you want my help, you have to pay a price. For example, dream on." A small dumpling suddenly appeared between the two of them and pushed Li Weiran. Xiao Bao grabbed Mu Yan's hand tightly and glared at Li Weiran. The bichie sword at his waist buzzed. "Mother belongs to Daddy and me. You don't have a share. Stop dreaming." Li Weiran chuckled. "Little guy, do you know who your biological father is? That man called Di Mingju doesn't seem to be your biological father, right?" Little Treasure was taken aback, and the light in his eyes dimmed for a moment. "Li Weiran." Mu Yan stared at him coldly. "I dare you to say that again." Li Weiran coughed lightly and touched his nose. "I was wrong, I'm sorry. Mu Yan, don't be angry, I was just talking nonsense." Mu Yan. Damn it, it's like she's punched cotton. She's so sullen that she wants to die. She can't wait to directly trample this guy into meat paste. Li Weiran saw that her face was still dark. He glanced at Xiao Bao and said reluctantly, "All right, you're sorry too. No need. I don't care." Lang Yuma moved closer to Mu Yan's side. "I say, junior sister, where did this pervert who has the same temperament as third senior brother come from? Why does it sound like Instructor Mo's love rival?" Her voice was strangely excited. Teacher Mo saw this scene. Wouldn't he go crazy? Wouldn't he directly destroy the entire floating island? Luo Yu pinched her nose and said, "This person isn't just a pervert, he's simply a lunatic." Now that she saw this Li Weiran, Luo Yu felt a chill on her neck. Back then, because she stopped him from disturbing Mu Yan's treatment of third senior brother, this guy almost killed her. Mobile users, please browse and read. For a better reading experience, please visit the website. Chapter 3490. Li Weiran's strength is clearly not on the same level as theirs. But so what if he's powerful? He still can't compare to Instructor Mo. Every time Instructor Mo appears, this guy is like a mouse seeing a cat, running away faster than a ghost. Mu Yan slightly squints at Li Weiran. "How do you know Di Mingju? How do you know if he's Xiao Bao's biological father?" "Li Weiran, who are you?" Li Weiran slowly walks a few steps closer, his eyes behind the red silk stare straight at Mu Yan. "Who wouldn't know the Polar Domain's emperor? As for who I am, how do I know if he's Xiao Bao's biological father?" He pauses. "I also want to tell you now, but I'm afraid the situation doesn't allow it." As soon as his voice falls, Mu Yan feels a huge suction force attacking. Immediately after, a large crack appears on the ground below. "Ah, bastard! We actually forgot that this is the entrance to the chaotic heaven cave." Mu Yan's group of 5, including Xiao Bao and Li Weiran, all fall down. Only Uncle Cheng, who escaped further away, escapes this disaster. Uncle Cheng looks at the empty flower field in shock. His hands and feet go soft, unable to stand for a long time. Those young boys and girls who can contend against Eation, they are all swallowed into the chaotic heaven cave. Can they still come out alive? Uncle Cheng shakily stands up with great difficulty. He collects the family's corpses and is about to leave. Suddenly, a golden light shoots over like lightning from afar. Uncle Cheng, who has just experienced a life and death situation, has long become a frightened bird. Seeing the person suddenly appear in front of him, he is so scared that he almost covers his head and scurries away. Amitabha, benefactor, don't panic. This little monk just wants to ask you something. Uncle Cheng calms himself down, only then does he realize that the person who came is actually a young monk with delicate features. His tone is very gentle and humble, there is no murderous aura around him, instead there is a trace of holiness. Uncle Cheng sighs in relief. What does the great monk want to ask? The little monk looks around, then says, just now, was there a person playing the zither here? This little monk means, was there a musician who used a spell here? Uncle Cheng was startled. He nodded and said, there was indeed a lady playing the zither. She used the skills of a musician. The little monk's expression turned solemn. He bowed and said, benefactor, please tell me where she is now, or which direction she went. Uncle Cheng pointed to the ground and said, just now, it was swallowed into the heaven-mixing cave. The small monk lowered his long eyelashes and looked at the nine-tailed dragon sunflower. Amitabha, so that's how it is. This is a random teleportation formation. I have no choice but to make a trip to the mystic realm. After saying that, the little monk put his palms together and slowly walked into the flowering shrub. Hey, you're crazy. That's the chaotic heaven cave abode, you'll die. Before he could finish his words, the small monk had already disappeared into the flowering shrubs. There was neither a crack in the ground nor a great suction force. The little monk seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Uncle Cheng rubbed his eyes and shook his head after a long time. With a wry smile, he rushed toward the family. He had to inform the patriarch of everything that happened today as soon as possible. Especially Yi Qingfeng's plan, it might bring unpredictable results to 1 country, 3 alliances, 6 families, and 8 great sections. Coo, coo, coo. Woof, woof. Mom, mom. Wake up. Oh, it's so scary here. The noisy voice of the little yellow chick kept ringing in her ears, causing Mu Yen to frown and wake up from her deep sleep. Chapter 3491. Guji. Seeing that she had opened her eyes, the little chick pounced over excitedly and crashed into her arms. Mom, that's great, you're finally awake. Huang Huang was so scared. Big-eyed chick's fluffy and chubby body was shivering. His head is buried in Mayan's arms, but his buttocks are twisting and turning, looking indescribably comical. Poochie! She hears a chuckle, and Mu Yen can't help but raise her head to look. The one who laughed was a handsome young man with his hair tied up in a jade crown. Seeing Mu Yen looking at him, he smiled and said, I am Ningyu. It is my honor to meet such a beautiful girl here. As soon as this person opened his mouth, Mu Yen found that something was wrong. Although his voice was a little low and neutral, it was clear and melodious. Taking a closer look at this person's appearance, although he didn't have any makeup on, his eyebrows were delicate, and his neck was fair and slender. Although it was half covered by the collar, if one looked closely, one could see that he didn't have an Adam's apple. This was a girl dressed as a man. Honor my ass. A flustered and exasperated voice came from the side. The 2 of us have been trapped in this godforsaken place for more than 10 days and are about to become food for this monster. How can you still feel honored? Bah! Damn, women have long hair and short brains. They can't even recognize their own situation. Mu Yen looks to the other side and sees a burly man with an unkempt beard and an impatient look on his face. Only then did she realize that she seemed to be in a very strange place. The surroundings were pitch black, with only the illumination crystal in the middle emitting a faint yellow light. The ground under his feet was sticky, but there was no stench. Instead, there was a rich fragrance. This is the bud of the 10,000 rotten flower. As if sensing Mu Yan's confusion, Ningyu stood up and walked to her side, revealing a friendly smile. 10,000 rotten flower? Magical plants? Mu Yen had previously seen a description of this kind of flower in the Record of Countering Poisonous Creatures, found in the Tian Mo Chin Spacebook Pagoda. This is a kind of man-eating flower. The 10,000 rotten flower was incomparably huge, and it would only ever be in 2 states, budding or in full bloom. The blooming 10,000 rotten flower was as big as a small house. It was good at capturing any living thing around it. These living creatures are not eaten immediately, but are stored in the flower sacs. This continued until the 10,000 rotten flower went from its blooming stage to its budding state. It needed to absorb enough nutrients to bloom again, so it began to devour the reserve food in the pouch. Just now, Ningyu said that they were in the flower bud of the 10,000 rotten flower. In other words, they were the reserves of the 10,000 rotten flower. He would be eaten sooner or later. Mayan raises her hand, the 7 absolute sword appears in her palm, and she slashes it high up in the air. However, the sword chi did not even cause a ripple when it entered the darkness. TSK. Idiot, if this 10,000 rotten flower can be easily broken, do you think we would still be trapped here? Mu Yen doesn't pay any attention to the toe-digging man's ridicule. She turns around and walks around, using her hand to knock on the flower wall. It was soft, a little sticky, and had a strong floral fragrance. The little chick hopped over on its short legs and pecked at the wall of the flower with its sharp beak. Then, he would spit poo 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 in disgust. Mu Yen lowered her head to look at the playful little chick with a strange look in her eyes. This guy really is like a fish in water, no matter where he goes. Chapter 3492. What kind of spiritual pet is this? Why haven't I seen it before? At some point, Ningyu had walked up to her side. She looked at the little chick with hesitation. I don't sense any cultivation or spirit energy fluctuations from it. Could it be that its cultivation is so high that even I can't see through it? The little chick spat out a bubble and tilted its head, causing the ahog on its head to stand up. Then, with a grunt, it staggers its chubby little body over to Mayan's side. In the end, he slipped and fell flat on his face. When she raised her head, her big eyes were filled with tears of grievance. She reached out her little paws for a hug. Ningyu, she swallowed the last words. Mu Yen smiled as she picked up the little chick and let it perch on her shoulder. When she looked up, she saw Ningyu's clear eyes staring at her. She couldn't help but stare blankly. Ningyu said, I'm sorry. I don't know why, but I feel like I've known you for a long time. Although it's our first meeting, I feel a strange familiarity with you. After saying this, she sees Mu Yen staring at her. Ningyu suddenly feels a little embarrassed. Am I being too rude? Actually, I'm not usually this easygoing. Mu Yen suddenly hooks her lips into a smile. My name is Jun Mu Yen. However, he silently repeated it in his heart. Ningyu, was her surname Ning? Jun Mu Yen? What a good name. Ningyu excitedly pulled her to sit down. May I know which sect you are from? What do you usually like to do? Just now, I saw that your sword was sparkling and translucent. It was really beautiful. Are you also a sword cultivator? Heh, I am also a sword cultivator. It should be said that more than half of our family will choose to become sword cultivators. Mu Yen didn't expect that although this Ningyu looks valiant and heroic, she is actually a chatterbox. But she really wanted to find out some information, so she asked, the 6 great families of the floating island, Yi, En, Wen, Ning, Situ, Beitang. Your surname is Ning, are you a disciple of the Ning family? Main family or branch family? Ningyu smiled, look at me, how can I be from the same family? I'm just the most inconspicuous member of the branch family. Just as Mu Yen is about to speak, the ground under her feet suddenly shakes violently. It's about to start eating. Someone at the side screamed in horror. It's over, it's over. It's finally getting ready to eat us. Almost as soon as he finished speaking, countless tiny tentacles stretched out from the flower wall. The tentacle had a small mouth filled with sharp teeth. Caught off guard, the Khan was hit in the face by a dozen or so tentacles, and he let out a shrill scream. In the blink of an eye, that face was badly mutilated. Ningyu did not panic. Instead, she laughed. I've been waiting for you for a long time. He pulled out a silver flexible sword from his waist and infused it with spiritual energy. The flexible sword let out a buzzing sound and straightened. Mu Yen, be careful. She reached out and pulled Mu Yen behind her to protect her. The software in her hand danced like a silver snake, and in the blink of an eye, those tentacles were completely cut off. Her movements are like floating clouds and flowing water, exceptionally beautiful. In between, she even has the leisure to explain to Mu Yen, when the 10,000 rotten flower closes, its flower sac's defensive power is incomparably strong. It's basically impossible to break through from the inside. But when it's about to bloom, its defense will become weak. Now is the time for us to go out. Mu Yen sees that she's doing it with ease, so she's not in a hurry to help. Instead, she unhurriedly collects the mucus inside the flower sac of the 10,000 rotten flower. Chapter 3493. On the other side, the brawny man screams and flees in a sorry state. At this time, he no longer has the arrogance of a moment ago and cries for his father and mother as he rushes towards the two. Save me, let me hide behind you. However, Ningyu lifts her foot and kicks him, sending him flying several meters away and crashing into the flower wall. Immediately, he is entangled by more tentacles, and the flesh on his body is torn off piece by piece, revealing the ghastly white bones. Ningyu curls her lips. I'm a neat freak. Everyone wants me to protect them. Do you think I'm a fool? Mu-Yen, don't you think so? Mu-Yen can't help but curl up the corner of her lips and say, yes. This Ningyu is quite to her liking. Ningyu hears her concise and comprehensive answer and is also very happy. She wields the software in her hand more diligently. Finally, the fragrance of the flower sac is gradually replaced by a pungent stench. Ningyu shouts, it's time! Holding a long sword, she soars into the air and fiercely slashes at the flower wall. There's a crackling sound, and a dazzling light, accompanied by fresh air, pours in from above. Ningyu grabs Mu-Yan's hand and flies out of the flower sac. Phew, we're finally out. Ningyu gives a big stretch and says with a happy expression, I came to this chaotic heaven cave to fight, but I was unlucky enough to be trapped in the 10,000 rotten flowers for so many days. Ha, now I can finally have a good fight. Mu-Yen also looks around and is surprised to find that this is actually a forest of magical plants. There are descriptions and images that she has seen in ancient books, such as oyster thorn, corpse bone vine, arrow charm. There are also some that she has never seen or heard of. Moreover, the size of each magical plant is incomparably huge. As if sensing the existence of other kinds of creatures, these magical plants immediately attack in the direction of the two people. Ningyu shakes the silver sword in her hand and says with a smile, Mu-Yen, can you deal with these magical plants? If you can't stand within the range of my sword light, I will protect you. Mu-Yen shakes her head, no need, I can protect myself. Saying that, she takes out the Tian Mo Chin and gently plays it. A protective cover immediately covers her whole body. The moment she sees these magical plants, Mu-Yan's eyes brighten and her heart is boiling. These were all precious natural treasures. If he collected them, he would be able to make a huge breakthrough in both alchemy and poison refinement. Under the bright light, the girl's skin was as white as snow, and her features were so exquisite that she didn't look like a mortal. Her snow-white clothes were stained with dust, but she didn't seem disheveled at all. Instead, there was a kind of fragile beauty. Ningyu can't help but look worriedly at Mu-Yen, who is approaching a arrow charm, forgetting even her own safety. It was rare for him to find such a beautiful and delicate woman pleasing to the eye. It would be a pity if they were killed by the demonic plants just like that. Then, Ningyu saw a scene that left her dumbfounded. Before she could react, the fragile girl in her heart had chopped the powerful magic plant, Charm of Arrow, into pieces. Because Arrow Charm already had a trace of living consciousness, it was still struggling after being cut off, trying to attack Mu-Yen. Then, she was chopped into minced meat by the weak girl. The minced meat was then rolled together into a big ball, and then casually thrown into an incomparably shabby-looking basket. Mu-Yen nods in satisfaction, then turns around and walks towards the next target. Chapter 3494. It took Ningyu a long time to pick up her fallen chin. She couldn't help but laugh out loud. Looking at Mu-Yen, her eyes are full of admiration and appreciation. Truly worthy of being the person she fancies, she really has some skills. It's not easy for her to have a friend, so she must perform well and not let her down. Ningyu boosts her spirit, activates the soft sword, and is about to kill the magical plants. Suddenly, she sees a bloody figure flying out of the 10,000 rotten flowers bud from the corner of her eye, and pounces straight towards Mu-Yen. Mu-Yen, be careful. The one who pounces out is the toe-digging man who has been bitten by the 10,000 rotten flower beyond recognition. At this time, there is not a single piece of good flesh on his body, and his internal organs are riddled with holes. In the heaven-mixing cave, where danger lurked everywhere, he knew that there was no way he could survive. But the resentment and unwillingness in his heart makes him hold on to his last breath and climb out of the flower sack. It's all because of those two bitches that he fell into this situation. If they were willing to save him, he could still live. He will definitely live. So even if he dies, he must drag one of them to hell with him. Ningyu is too strong. Then drag this new girl to hell with her. Ningyu's warning is timely, but the strength of the toe-digging man is also extremely strong. With the idea of dying together, he doesn't hesitate to burn his spiritual power and divine soul. And Mu-Yen is squatting down to collect the magical plants, as if she doesn't notice what's happening. Ningyu is burning with anxiety, but she can't rush to save him. So without thinking, she takes the bell hanging on her waist and throws it at the man. Jingle! The bell makes a crisp sound, and appears in front of Mu-Yen in a flash. The burly man's head collided with the bell, producing a loud bang as he was sent flying several meters away. The bell shakes in the air, making a jingle sound, and falls to the ground. Mu-Yen turns her head and sees the falling bell. She can't help but reach out to catch it. Ningyu's face changes when she sees this scene from afar, and she yells, "Mu Yan, you can't touch this bell." But her words are still a bit late. The bell has already fallen into Mu Yan's palm. Mu Yan's whole body trembles. She only feels a numbness spreading from her palm to her whole body. The bell in his palm also trembled slightly, but it soon calmed down. That strange feeling also disappeared without a trace. Ningyu almost pounced over and slapped the bell in her hand to the ground. Then he looks over in shock. "Mayan, are you all right?" Mayan blinks. "I'm fine." Ningyu stares blankly at the bell on the ground. She grabs Mu Yan's hand and turns it over and over several times. Sure enough, there were no signs of it being burned. His face was filled with astonishment. You're really all right? When you touched the bell just now, didn't you feel anything strange? For example, his whole body felt like it was being burned by fire? Mu Yan shook her head. "No. I feel like I've been numbed by something." Ningyu's pupils suddenly constricted, her eyes fixed on Mu Yan, as if she was looking at a monster. "What's wrong? Is there something strange about this magic treasure?" Ningyu is sluggish for a long time, and reluctantly picks up the bell, smiling. "No, it's nothing. This bell is called the blood pattern bell. It has the effect of defense and activating sword intent, but it's not a well-known magic treasure. Mu Yan, you might not have heard of it." Mu Yan reaches out to touch the blood pattern bell. This time, even the numbness from the trembling of her whole body has disappeared. Chapter 3495. From the looks of it, it really seemed to be a very ordinary magic treasure. But Ningyu's expression is very strange. What secret is hidden in this blood pattern bell? But soon, she puts these thoughts to the back of her mind. She heard that once you enter the heaven mixing cave, it is equivalent to being in a small world. Even if they enter hand in hand at the same time, they may not necessarily appear in the same place. And to meet in different places is more difficult than ascending to heaven. Although Mu Yan is worried about the safety of Xiao Bao and her fellow apprentices, she can only restrain herself. The only thing she can do now is to find a way out as soon as possible. "We can't go out yet. There is the breath of the Tian Mo Qin in this heaven-mixing cave." Hearing the abrupt voice in her ear, Mu Yan is already used to it. "Qi Huang, you mean, there are materials to repair the Tian Mo Qin here? Where is it?" "Qi Huang, how would I know?" Mu Yan's mouth twitches. "Then how do you want me to find it?" "Just turn this shitty cave upside down and you'll find it." Mu Yan presses the throbbing veins on her forehead. Qi Huang, this brat, always gives her a difficult problem. He doesn't even say a word when she needs him. He's not as reliable as the little chick. She doesn't want him to give her big trouble every time he comes out. Now it seems that she can't rush to go out. Should he turn over the chaotic heaven cave abode? That's fine. At least that way, she can reunite with Xiao Bao and her fellow apprentices as soon as possible. Boom! After a loud noise, a fierce beast as big as a mountain comes crashing down. It almost submerges the small figure below. But soon, a person rushes out, picks up the little baby and rolls to the side. "Xiao Bao, are you okay?" Qin Jiu nervously looks at the delicate and beautiful baby in her arms, her eyes full of worry. Xiao Bao shakes his head. "Second martial uncle, don't worry, Xiao Bao is fine." Qin Jiu breathes a sigh of relief, revealing a silly smile, and is about to speak. Suddenly, a yawning voice comes from the side. "Finally finished? Then can we continue on our way?" Li Weiran says as he slowly stands up. Xiao Bao coldly says, "Who is with you? You are not allowed to follow us anymore." Li Weiran said slowly, "That won't do. It won't be easy to find Mu Yan in this chaotic heaven cave. The best shortcut is to stay with you. She may not look for anyone else, but she will definitely look for you. Little guy, right?" Xiao Bao said angrily. "So what if you find it? Mother won't care about you." "Oh, is that so?" Li Weiran smiled. "So what if she ignores me? I just need to stick to her." Xiao Bao's little face flushed red with anger. "Second martial uncle, let's go." Qin Jiu nodded, took a step forward, and immediately vanished on the spot like a hawk. The three of them were currently in a huge desert. As far as the eye could see, it was an expanse of desolation and devoid of human habitation. But from time to time, huge beasts would emerge from the sand. These beasts were extremely powerful. Fortunately, they did not appear in groups. At most, they would appear in groups of 2 or 3. Little Treasure and Qin Jiu, the two of them joining hands, also easily dealt with it. 3 giant lizards were slain. Qin Jiu looked at the little boy holding a sword and standing on top of the corpses. She couldn't help but praise, "Little martial nephew, you're amazing." Xiao Bao's brows were indifferent and cold, but his pair of ice blue eyes were as bright as the stars. Chapter 3496. Hearing Qinjiu's praise, there was no arrogance or modesty. He just quietly took out the most important inner core of the beast and kept it in his storage space. Qinjiu raised his head and saw Li Weiran standing not far away. Because of the long journey, the red silk covering Li Weiran's face had already flown away. Behind the red silk, a pair of deep and bone-chilling icy blue eyes appeared. The face of a young man that originally had some childishness. After the red silk had lost its concealment, it unexpectedly revealed a somewhat treacherous and frightening mature charm. Qinjiu's thoughts had always been slow. But at this moment, he suddenly felt that the two pairs of ice blue eyes were very similar. A thought popped up in his mind. So Li Weiran's eyes were also ice blue. Just like Xiao Bao. Just like Teacher Mo, after taking the inner core, the three continued forward. But all they could see was endless yellow sand. Qinjiu couldn't help but ask, Xiao Bao, is this the right way? They had already walked for a few days, but every day they saw the same scene. Were they really not going around in circles? Xiao Bao nodded, this way. How can you be sure this is the right direction? Li Weiran's question sounded in his ear. Xiao Bao ignored him but met Qinjiu's curious gaze. His face was still taut as he said, intuition. Li Weiran. Hee, it's actually intuition. Xiao Bao heard the teasing in his tone and was so angry that his cheeks puffed up. But he didn't look at him and instead looked at Qinjiu. Second Uncle Master, Xiao Bao's intuition has always been very accurate. In the past, when Mother entered the forest to search for treasures, it was Xiao Bao who found them for her. Qinjiu nodded without hesitation. Xiao Bao, you are right. Xiao Bao curled his lips and glared at Li Weiran. Suddenly, his little face changed. Second Uncle Master, put me down. Qinjiu did as he was told. Xiao Bao immediately knelt on one knee and pressed his little hand on the yellow sand. Then his expression became more and more serious. Buzz buzz buzz. The Bixie sword at his waist let out a warning buzz. At this moment, even Qinjiu felt that something was wrong. He quickly took out the 10,000-ton hammer and pulled Xiao Bao behind him. The sand dunes on the ground suddenly rolled violently like waves. From thousands of meters away, they formed a circle and headed straight for the two of them. Hua! Dozens of meters of sand and dust rose and fell, covering the sky. After the dust settled, a densely packed army of beasts appeared. It wasn't one, but 3 to 5 of them. There were thousands of them. There were all kinds of fierce beasts. There were reptiles, tigers, leopards, jackals, there were countless of them. The only similarity was that every single one of them was struggling. Their green eyes were greedily staring at the two of them. Qinjiu's expression was grave. He raised his twin hammers and ruthlessly smashed away a poisonous scorpion. He shouted, Xiao Bao, run! How could Xiao Bao be willing to abandon the Qin wine and run away at this time? Without hesitation, he raised his sword and joined the battle. Under the ferocious roars of thousands of wild beasts, the small figure was like a small boat in the sea, about to be swallowed up at any time. These wild beast strengths were not much different from the 3 lizards they had just killed. But there were just too many of them. Even with Xiao Bao and Qinjiu's shocking talents and dense spiritual energy, they were starting to be unable to hold on. They could barely lift their hands. The spiritual energy in their dantian was almost exhausted. Xiao Bao suddenly realized that the target of these beasts wasn't Qinjiu, but him. Chapter 3497. You can search on Baidu for Enchantress of Healing Beauty, Heaven-Defying Baby's Black-Bellied Father. Search for the latest chapter. Immortal Spirit Body. In this world, any living being that cultivated would covet the immortal spiritual body. He was the one who attracted these beasts, and more of them came. He was the one who dragged second martial uncle into this. Thinking of this, Xiao Bao shouted, Bixie? The Bixie sword soared into the sky, carrying Xiao Bao in one direction. Qinjiu shouted, Xiao Bao, come back. He chased after it. But he wasn't good at speed. How could he catch up to Bixie? In the blink of an eye, Xiao Bao's figure became smaller and smaller, and the beasts that surrounded him also changed direction and chased after Xiao Bao. In the vast desert, there was a strange scene. The flying sword flew in the sky like a meteor, and on it stood a child that looked no more than 5 or 6 years old. Below the little child was a densely packed army of ferocious beasts. They were roaring and howling nonstop as they tried to devour the little child into their stomachs. Xiao Bao's blue skin was getting paler, and he couldn't even sweat. His body wobbled a few times, and he almost fell off the sword. Little master, how are you? Bixie's voice became faint and distant. Damn it, why can't I have a sword spirit of my own, if I can absorb the heaven and earth yuan qi, if I can control the Bixie sword, roar? A roar came from below. Suddenly, a giant tongue stretched out in the sky, wrapped around Xiao Bao and dragged him down. Little master. The Bishie sword buzzed, it wanted to chase after him, but because it had lost its divine sense and spiritual energy, it fell to the ground powerlessly. Xiaobao felt something wet and sticky was strangling him, dragging him down. He wanted to resist, but he was powerless. But the next moment, he heard the sound of a sharp knife cutting through flesh. Then, a sticky and stinky liquid sprayed on him. The restraint disappeared. Xiaobao's body fell into a cold embrace. Some kind of cool energy was injected into his body, and his exhausted dantian started to recover. Strange. Who injected energy into him? Was this spiritual energy? Immortal energy? Or divine energy? In the past, after forging the immortal body, he could no longer accept spiritual power from anyone other than his father and mother. Who had saved him? Xiaobao struggled to open his eyes. When he saw the person in front of him clearly, his little face almost scrunched up. How could it be you? The one who saved him, hugged him and gave him spiritual energy was actually Li Weiran. This super invincible and annoying fellow. Li Weiran raised his eyebrows. Who else did you think it was? Xiaobao was so angry that he struggled vigorously, trying to break free from his embrace. I don't need you to save me. Don't think that you can covet my mother just because you saved me. When my father comes, he'll definitely tear you into 1,000 pieces. Li Weiran smiled casually. Is that so? But are you sure that if I don't save you, can you wait until Di Mingju comes to save you? Xiaobao sneered and broke free from his embrace. Stepping back onto the evil warding sword, he said, even if I die, I don't need you, before the last word, save, could leave his mouth. Suddenly, a loud rumble came from below. A huge crater had appeared on the yellow sand that was densely packed with vicious beasts. Countless vicious beasts screamed and fell down. Xiaobao looked down in shock. But he was met with a pair of dark green eyes that were even larger than his head. Then, sharp teeth covered in blood and flesh slowly emerged from the yellow sand. And black skin full of ugly bumps and pustules. Chapter 3498. It's a monster that's hundreds of times bigger than an ordinary vicious beast. The moment it meets Xiaobao's eyes, dozens of scarlet tongues, carrying stinking mucus, fly towards Xiaobao. Quite a bit of that mucus drips onto the yellow sand. The yellow sand actually melts. Xiaobao's eyes widen, wanting to escape, but the blood in his body seems to be frozen. It's an invisible pressure. This pressure is even stronger than Uncle Han Yi and Sister Ing Mei. He doesn't understand how such a powerful vicious beast can exist on the road of cultivation. And he's going to die here today. Is it impossible to escape? If he dies here, his mother will definitely be very sad, and his father, Puchi. The sound of flesh being pierced comes to his ears. But Xiaobao doesn't feel any pain. Because at this very moment, he's being held tightly in someone's arms, blocking all the attacks. What he sees is a glaring scarlet, as well as sizzling blisters from the corroded flesh, and the white bones that appear after the flesh has been completely corroded. It's Li Weiran. He used his left hand and his back to block the giant beast's attack. But the price he paid is incomparably heavy. His entire left hand is practically only left with bones. And his back is also dripping with blood, too horrible to look at. Xiaobao can hardly find his own breath. After a long time, he says with a trembling voice, why did he risk his life to save him? Doesn't this person clearly hate him? Li Weiran tossed him aside, not even looking at his left hand. He looked down at the huge beast below, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Desolate poisonous toad, in such a small secret territory, how can there be such a fierce beast of this level? Is it the chaotic heaven cave? How interesting. When Qin Jiu hurries over, he sees flying sand and rolling stones, the sky is dark, as if it's the end of the world. His mind is in chaos, even his eyes can't help but redden. Xiaobao is the most important martial nephew of the Xiaoyao sect. He's the little sister's treasure. If Xiaobao dies here, Qin Jiu doesn't know what he'll do. He'd rather be the one to die. That way, the little sister won't be so sad. Xiaobao! Xiaobao! His hoarse and mournful howl was mixed with the yellow sand that filled the sky, bringing with it a deeper and deeper despair. Just as Qin Jiu was about to lose all hope, a familiar voice rang in her ears. Second martial uncle, I'm here. It was Xiaobao. It was Little Treasure's voice. Qin Jiu looked in the direction of the voice in ecstasy. Unknowingly, the yellow sand that filled the sky had gradually calmed down. After the yellow sand settled, two figures slowly appeared. One was Little Treasure, who had removed his spiritual energy barrier. The other was Li Weiran, whose body was riddled with holes and whose original appearance was almost unrecognizable. Qin Jiu quickly came to Xiaobao's side. Xiaobao, are you alright? Xiaobao shook his head. Second martial uncle, don't worry. I'm fine. He couldn't help but look at Li Weiran with a complicated expression. He saved me. Only then did Qin Jiu realize that there was a small mountain of corpses not far away. He didn't know what kind of monster it was, but it was already dead. Half of the body was buried in the sand and the other half was exposed. But even if it was only half, it was enough to make people despair. If Li Weiran didn't save him, then Xiaobao, thinking of that terrifying outcome, Qin Jiu's heart palpitated. He looked at Li Weiran with a face full of gratitude and stammered, Thank you for saving Xiaobao. Chapter 3499. Li Weiran was currently treating the wounds on his body. A thick, inky black energy flowed out from his long, white fingertips and entered his body. Then he saw those ugly, stinky blisters disappear at a speed visible to the naked eye. The skin on his back became smooth and white again, outlining the perfect waistline. But the flesh on his left hand that had been completely corroded did not grow back, still exposing the eerie white bones. It looked incomparably miserable and frightening. Hearing Qin Jiu's words, Li Weiran curled his lips and said indifferently, I didn't save this little guy for you, why are you thanking me? Qin Jiu was not the least bit annoyed at being rebutted like that. Instead, he revealed a silly smile, you are a good person. He didn't know who Li Weiran was or how dangerous he was. He only knew that it was this person who saved his little martial nephew. Good person? Li Weiran's eyes flashed and he looked deeply at Qin Jiu. He laughed mockingly, this is the first time someone called me a good person. Xiaobao frowned and asked, why did you save me? Li Weiran looked down at his big, icy blue eyes. Of the little boy's appearance, only this pair of eyes was unlike his mother's. Icy blue pupils were rare in the world, but it wasn't non-existent. But now that he was looking at this little guy, Li Weiran felt a deeper sense of familiarity. This pair of eyes was very similar to his. But, it was even more similar to that person. Li Weiran's heart suddenly jumped. An unimaginable thought emerged in his mind. But he didn't show it on his face and said lightly, I saved him if I wanted to, why do I need a reason? Why? Are you so grateful to me that you want to recognize me as your father? Xiaobao's cheeks puffed up and he said angrily, Xiaobao only has one father, I don't want to recognize you. Li Weiran sneered and said indifferently, aren't you going to help Mayan bring back the inner core and poison sac of the desolate poisonous toad? Xiaobao pursed his lips and walked towards the already dead giant monster with a cold face. But when he passed by Li Weiran, his eyes couldn't help but stop on Li Weiran's hand that was only left with white bones. He had just been touched by the poison of the desolate poisonous toad. It was very painful, as if his flesh was being burned and melted. Although his immortal body has a powerful self-healing ability, let small wounds quickly heal. But that kind of pain was deeply engraved in his bones, and he couldn't help but tremble when he thought about it. Li Weiran's entire hand was corroded by the poison. And all of this was to save him. Why would this scoundrel throw away his life in order to save him? Xiaobao felt that he should hate this bad guy who snatched his mother away from his father. But at this moment, he felt very complicated. Actually, Li Weiran had already saved him twice. Although every time, she was careless, as if saving him was a charity. But without him, she might not have survived at all. Mother will also be very sad. Xiaobao clenched his fists. He thought to himself, Mother said that a real man should repay kindness with kindness and revenge with hatred. This hateful person had saved him so many times. No matter what, he had to be grateful and think of a way to repay him in the future. But it's impossible for his mother to give it to him. Mother is Xiaobao and father. After thinking this through, Xiaobao said, I'll remember your kindness of saving me, and I'll definitely repay you in the future. And your hand, wait until you see Mother, she will definitely be able to cure it. Don't worry. Chapter 3500. After saying that, Little Bao realized that Li Weiran was looking at him as if he was an idiot. His thin lips were already slightly curled up. Aren't you talking nonsense? Naturally, I kept this hand for Mu Yan's treatment. I saved her precious son twice, she should think about how to repay me. Or, do you think that I will not repay your kindness? Xiaobao was so angry that his little face turned red. He wished that he could pull out the evil warding sword and stab this guy a few times. Bastard. 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 He was really stupid to worry about this bad guy, and he even felt guilty. He should have just let the monster eat him. Not even dregs were left. Xiaobao held the evil warding sword and slashed the desolate poisonous toad again and again to vent his anger. It was as if he was chopping down Li Weiran. Not far away, Li Weiran couldn't help but smile when he saw that the little fellow's face was 70% similar to Mu Yan's, but he still had that childish look on his face. However, when this trace of a smile came into contact with Xiaobao's eyes, it slowly became sinister and cold. Xiaobao couldn't help but frown after taking out the poison sac and inner elixir of the desolate poisonous toad. This desolate poisonous toad was too smelly. Even though he was holding his breath, it was still nauseating. Moreover, the stench was poisonous and had already spread in all directions. Even Qinjiu's face had turned red due to holding her breath for a long time. Her skin had also developed many small red rashes due to contact with the poison. And this is because Qinjiu has already taken the antidote given by Mayan. If this poisonous gas were to spread out, would even his mother and the other martial uncles be affected? Xiaobao thought about it and asked the fat rabbit, "Bunny, can you eat it?" The fat rabbit immediately shook its head like a rattle. "Not eating, not eating, not eating. It would rather die than eat such a smelly thing. What if its little master didn't like it after eating it and it started to have bad breath?" Xiaobao was at his wit's end. Li Weiran slowly walked forward, took out a bottle, and poured out a drop of water. That drop of water was as black as ink and landed on the corpse of the desolate poisonous toad. They immediately transformed into tens of thousands of little black bugs. These bugs quickly crawled into the wounds of the toad. It gnawed all the way and crawled out from another wound. In the blink of an eye, the desolate poisonous toad, which was bigger than a mountain, was completely eaten. Xiaobao's scalp went numb as he looked at the black water droplets of insects that had gathered together again. This little bug is very similar to the golden silkworm goo that Mu Yan had refined. But it was far more powerful than the golden silkworm goo. This was because the golden silkworm goo was unable to resist the poison produced by the desolate poisonous toad. He saw Xiaobao's big eyes staring at the porcelain bottle in his hand. Li Weiran smirked and stuffed the porcelain bottle into his arms. "Black witch goo. If you like it, I'll give it to you." Xiaobao blinked. Who said he liked her? However, the black witchcraft goo seemed to be very powerful. Most importantly, the fat rabbit in the space was already howling excitedly. It seemed that the black witchcraft goo was a delicious delicacy to it, and Xiaobao had to take it. Xiaobao blushed and put the porcelain bottle into the space of the Bixie sword. He said in a voice as quiet as a mosquito, "Thank you. You don't have to thank me too early." Li Weiran said with a smile that wasn't a smile, "I have to take back what I gave away." Xiaobao, a scoundrel is indeed a scoundrel. He hated it the most. Chapter 3501. You can search on Baidu for The Enchantress of the City, Heaven-Defying Baby's Black-Bellied Father. Search for the latest chapter. Huh? That is, what place? Qinjiu's puzzled voice comes, interrupting Xiaobao's panting with anger. The huge corpse of the desolate poisonous toad disappears. Under the yellow sand that originally buried it, there is a large piece of transparent glass. Looking down from above, you can see that there is a splendid palace inside. In the center of the palace is a place like an altar. There is a flame burning above it. Behind the flame, there are 3 glittering words, Wushang Palace. Li Weiran reveals a look of realization. Ah, so this is the ruins of Wushang Palace. No wonder there are such high-level beasts guarding it. Wushang Palace? Xiaobao blinks. He remembers that he heard his mother mention it before. Little brother Huang came out from Wushang Palace with his mother. Li Weiran looks at Xiaobao. "Little guy, you want to become stronger?" Xiaobao is startled, then he clenches his fist and nods. Li Weiran's brows slightly raise, and he carelessly says, "You should become a little stronger, so as not to drag Mayan down." Xiaobao. He is so angry that he becomes a pufferfish. Li Weiran doesn't pay attention to him. He raises his hand, and a black light falls on the top of the glass. Soon, there is a hole in the glass that even the poison emperor toad couldn't break. Li Weiran doesn't wait for Xiaobao and Qinjiu to react, and pushes them down with 2 palms. The moment Xiaobao and Qinjiu enter Wushang Palace, the hole in the glass immediately disappears. The yellow sand on both sides seems to have a life of its own, burying the top of the glass. Li Weiran looks at the desert that doesn't have any traces left behind, and his mouth hooks up into a brilliant arc. "If I can survive, I will certainly become stronger. Mayan will be very happy at that time, right? If I can't survive, then don't blame me, the weak are not qualified to survive." 10,000 heavenly beasts return to the sect, the mountains and rivers float in the sky. I am willing to offer my insignificant body as a sacrifice to the heavens. My soul will fall into the forgetting river, and I will have no regrets in this life. Just to give my son a ladder to the heavens. Father! The cold wind blew on his body. Luoyu was so cold that her entire body was trembling. She only felt that along with the sound of the wind, there seemed to be a distant and indistinct voice ringing in her ears. "I'll take you to the floating island. Chushi's life will be with you. From now on, I no longer have a father. In this world, only you are my most important family." The beast soul has been destroyed, Shuejin's life has come to an end. We can never meet again. From then on, my soul fell into the river of forgetfulness, my heart was torn and my intestines were broken. I only wish to be possessed by the filthy devil and be doomed eternally. Kill. Luo Yu opened her eyes abruptly, gasping for air. Cold sweat dripped from his forehead, but it was blown dry by the cold wind before it could fall. He couldn't help but shiver as he looked around. All he could see was darkness. The tip of his nose was filled with traces of mud and a rotten smell. After a while, Luo Yu could finally see clearly. This was actually a cave. The cave was covered with moss and plants adapted to the damp and dark environment. He stood up and walked around the cave, but did not find anything. There were no totems, nor were there any mechanisms or treasures. There was only one wall, which had hundreds of sword scars. There was no spiritual power attached to these sword scars. But for some reason, he could feel the monstrous hatred and pain in the heart of the person who made these sword scars. Who carved these sword scars? Was it the owner of the voice he heard in his sleep? Chapter 3502. Luo Yu was puzzled for a while, but then threw all this to the back of his mind. The voices ringing in his ears were very indistinct and distant. In his dream, listening to those voices, he felt as if his heart was being squeezed. He could feel the sorrow, despair, and anger that arose from the depths of his soul. But when he woke up, this feeling gradually faded. He even forgot most of the words he had heard. He searched around the cave again, and confirmed that there were no treasures or mechanisms inside. Luo Yu could only leave in disappointment. However, as soon as he left the cave, he was so scared that his soul almost left his body. Outside the cave was actually a large swamp. Outside the swamp, giant crocodiles were opening their bloody mouths, waiting for the arrival of food. Every crocodile's strength was above the mountain opening tier. If he had stepped out of the cave without feeling anything, he would definitely have become a meal for these crocodiles. Luo Yu patted his chest with lingering fear. Then he could not help but feel depressed. With these crocodiles here, how could he leave the cave? The crocodiles were extremely close to the cave. If he went out, he would not be able to fly into the sky, and both his legs would be bitten off. If it was one or two, he could still deal with it. But there were over 100 of them. Luo Yu returned to the cave gloomily. He racked his brains, but could not find a solution. He could not help but walk in front of those sword marks, and lightly touched them. Because one of the sword marks had sharp edges, his finger was accidentally cut. Fresh blood seeped out from his fingertip, and spread on the sword mark. The next moment, Luo Yu felt himself being swallowed into a ball of light. He faintly heard an old voice that seemed both familiar and strange. Of the same origin, you are not of a different race, please enter Wushang Palace to accept the test and gift. I only hope that Wushang's soul will forever remain in this world, unextinguished. As he walked out of the forest with the formation plate in his hand, Ling Yuxing let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, little junior sister had left him a random transportation formation, otherwise he would have been trapped in this damned place. However, as soon as he walked out of the forest, a wide plain appeared in front of him, and the plain was filled with all kinds of beautiful flowers. However, in front of him, there was actually a dense and endless forest. Ling Yuxing felt a headache coming on. His speed was very fast. However, this forest was too strange. No matter how fast he was, even if he used the absolute space domain, he would eventually return to his original position. Fortunately, he remembered the array disc his junior sister had given him. Only then did he manage to walk out of the forest with great effort. Who would have thought that apart from this valley, there would be another dense forest in front of them? If he wanted to walk out of this place, who knew how long it would take? Ling Yuxing let out a long sigh, but there was nothing he could do. He slowly stepped forward, but his figure had already traveled dozens of meters into the valley. Seeing the forest from afar, Ling Yuxing had thought that this valley wasn't that big. Who would have thought that even with his speed, after walking for a full hour, he was only halfway there? This valley seemed a little strange. Ling Yuxing was frowning in thought. Suddenly, a loud noise came with the wind. You guys stay here. Susu will go down with me. What kind of joke is this? I've already said that I would definitely protect Susu. I'll definitely go down with Susu. Susu, only I can protect you and take care of you here. These uncouth people, how would they know how to make you feel comfortable? Just let me go down with you, okay? Chapter 3503. Bastards, how dare you snatch Susu from me? Believe it or not, I'll kill you. Haha, with your mediocre skills, it's hard to say who will be the one to kill who. Ling Yuxing's footsteps stopped unconsciously. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the voice. There were many undulating hills in this valley. On the slopes of some hills, there were caves of various sizes, which seemed to have been left by some wild beasts. Ling Yuxing had noticed it before, but he didn't take it to heart. Looking over now, he found that the quarreling people were surrounding a cave. They were 3 tall, boorish men and a tall, slender woman dressed in a cotton dress with a braided hairpin. The quarreling 3 men were the ones. The tall woman was holding a silk handkerchief, wiping her tears while sobbing, "Don't quarrel over Su. Su doesn't deserve this." Hearing this delicate and timid voice, Ling Yuxing shuddered. And then the words Su flashed across his mind, and his eyes revealed a look of horror. He turned around and ran without thinking. However, the moment he stopped to check, the woman in front of him had already raised her head and met his eyes. "Husband!" A voice that shook the heavens and made ghosts and gods weep rang out. It was a mournful and melancholic cry. Ling Yuxing felt his scalp go numb. He activated the absolute space field to the extreme and took a step forward. However, with his speed that could easily kill a mountain opening state expert, he had only taken a few steps when he bumped into someone. Husband, you've made it hard for me to find you. You heartless person, do you know how sad Su is that she can't see you?" The blue veins on Ling Yuxing's forehead bulged, and he grabbed her arm and shook her off. "Yan Jishu, that's enough." Being yelled at by him, the woman in front of him burst into tears, crying her heart out. However, she was crying like a pear blossom in the rain, which made people feel sorry for her. It made people want to put all the best things in the world in front of her. "Who are you? How dare you make Su cry? I think you're tired of living. Su, why do you still care about such a husband? Why don't you let me kill him? You can follow me in the future. I won't let you suffer even the slightest bit." It was unknown when the 3 burly men had rushed over, but they were currently surrounding the crying woman and comforting her. However, when facing Ling Yuxing, he was fierce and his eyes were filled with killing intent. A few of them had already unsheathed their long sabers, looking as if they were going to tear Ling Yuxing into pieces. "No, I can't. You must not harm my husband." Yan Jishu strode in front of Ling Yuxing and said with a trembling voice, "I love my husband, and it will never change in this lifetime. If you kill my husband, Su won't be able to live alone. Su, move aside. What's so good about these gigolos? Open your eyes and take a look. We're the ones you can entrust your life to. Third bro, go pull Su away. Let me destroy this pretty boy's face. Let's see if Su is still reluctant to part with him." Yan Jishu said, "No, you can't. Sob. Husband, I'll block them. Quickly run." Ling Yuxing, Su, sorry for the offense. In the future, big brothers will definitely dote on you. Ugh. The man slowly lowered his head in disbelief and looked at his abdomen. There was a slender dagger stuck there. Chapter 3504. It was stained with blood because it had pierced his stomach. And the person holding the dagger was a slender, jade-like hand. Why? Su? The dagger in his abdomen was slowly pulled out. The woman, who was still crying, said apologetically, "I'm sorry. Su is deeply in love with my husband, and I won't allow anyone to hurt him. Besides, since my husband is here, you've already... It's no use." The woman's pink lips slowly curled up when she said the last 3 words. At the same time, a cold light flashed. Swish! Swish! The remaining 2 burly men covered their bleeding necks and fell to the ground, dying with their eyes wide open. Sob. Husband, their deaths are so horrifying. I'm scared. Throwing away the blood-stained dagger, Yan Jishu pounced at Ling Yuxing. However, Ling Yuxing was already prepared, so he turned around and retreated dozens of meters away, making her miss him. Sob, husband, I'm really scared. Why don't you hug me? Ling Yuxing gritted his teeth and said, Yan Jishu, if you don't want to talk nicely, I'm leaving. The woman, who was crying with a handkerchief, slowly stood up and showed a charming smile. You're so annoying. Little Shengxing, you're still so cold-hearted. It wasn't easy for us to meet again. Can't you be more gentle and considerate to me? I'm a beautiful woman after all. Everyone knows how to be gentle with women, but why don't you know, little Shengxing? Ling Yuxing's mouth twitched. Go to hell with teaching your body to be weak. Go to hell with your sister's beauty. Did this guy think he was blind? This guy was clearly taller than him when he stood up straight. His cultivation was terrifyingly high. Ordinary people couldn't compare to him. If anyone were to have tender feelings for the fairer sex, that person would surely be skinned alive by him. Most importantly, don't be fooled by this guy's gorgeous attire, which could be compared to most women in the world. But this guy wasn't a woman at all. That's right, Yan Jishu was a man dressed as a woman. And it was different from Ling Yuxing back then because he had been hurt and was mentally unstable, so he disguised as a woman. Perhaps he had disguised himself as a woman purely because of him. Joy! Joy! Now that the unfettered seven sons had reunited, their cultivation bases had all gone up a level. The others recounted their experiences during this period of time. Only Ling Yuxing had a gloomy expression on his face every time someone asked him about it, and he kept his mouth shut. It wasn't that he wanted to hide it, but everything that had happened after he arrived at the floating island gave him a headache just thinking about it. When Ling Yuxing landed on the floating island, he woke up on a beach. It was Yan Jishu who saved him. She knew that Sui had been dressing as a woman for a long time, so it was easy for him to play the part of a weak and innocent beauty. All these years, he had never been torn apart by anyone. Who knew that Ling Yuxing would see through his disguise at first glance because he had disguised himself as a man before. Since then, Yan Jishu had been pestering Ling Yuxing. Ling Yuxing was the one and only possessor of the absolute space domain. His speed was one of the fastest on the floating island. However, in the face of Yan Jishu, he had no way to escape. More often than not, he thought he had escaped. In the blink of an eye, this woman would come out like a haunting ghost. He had beaten him up, poisoned him by his junior sister, and even used the random teleportation formation disc. Chapter 3505. However, he couldn't escape from Yan Jishu's palm no matter what. During this period, Ling Yuxing's strength had even improved by leaps and bounds because of his several battles with Yan Jishu. Even his absolute space domain had advanced to the middle of the third level. However, Yan Jishu's strength was like a bottomless pit. Every time he fought with him, it was like he was playing with him, and he didn't even use 10% of his strength. In the end, Ling Yuxing was freed because Yan Jishu had left for some reason. Ling Yuxing's scalp went numb at the thought of this nightmarish experience. He thought he would never see this person again in his life. Who knew that enemies would meet on a narrow road in the Heaven Chaos Cave abode? Ling Yuxing took a deep breath. Why are you here? I'm here to reunite with little Shengsheng. Ling Yuxing turned around and left. Oh, little Shengsheng, don't be so stingy. I'm just joking with you. I'm here to get a treasure in the Heaven Chaos Cave abode. Ling Yuxing had just taken a few steps when a shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. He stopped and wanted to step back, but his chin was already grabbed by a cold and slender hand. The other party was clearly doing a domineering action, but the voice that came out of his mouth was indistinguishable, and it was so coquettish that it made one's scalp tingle. Sob, little Shengsheng, the treasure is in that cave, but it's so dark. I'm scared. Can you go in with me? Ling Yuxing wanted to retreat with a cold face, but he found that he couldn't break free from this person's shackles. He said coldly, no. Yan Jishu, let go. No way. If I let go, little Shengsheng, you'll run away. Yan Jishu looked like he was about to cry. He held the silk handkerchief and gently tapped Ling Yuxing's chest. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with infinite affection. She said softly, little Shengsheng, I've never met a man who suits my taste as much as you in my life. I want to entrust the rest of my life to you. Why don't you follow me? Then, Yan Jishu let go and suddenly approached Ling Yuxing. She leaned close to his ear and said in a low voice, from the first time I saw Xiao Xingxing, I knew that we were kindred spirits. It's been a long time since I've seen someone who could move my heart this much. You won't regret being with me. Ling Yuxing moved his feet and retreated 10 meters away. His usually handsome and gentle face was expressionless as he stared coldly at the beautiful woman in front of him. He said without hesitation, I refuse. Sob sob sob, why? Don't tell me I'm not beautiful and good enough? You're so annoying. Not only do I have a beautiful and enchanting body, I also have the skills to satisfy you. The veins on Ling Yuxing's forehead throbbed violently. Or are you worried about other people's opinions? Little Shengsheng, don't worry. If anyone dares to gossip about us, maybe you'll kill their entire family. Ling Yuxing took a deep breath and said indifferently, neither. Because I have a lover. Yan Jishu stopped wiping his tears. Men. A gentle smile appeared in Ling Yuxing's eyes. Yes, men. Aren't you afraid that the world won't tolerate you being with a man? Ling Yuxing's expression was calm and without the slightest ripple. Even if there are thousands of obstacles and mountains and oceans separating us, they can't stop me from being with him. Besides, it's just the words of a mortal. Chapter 3506. You can search on Baidu for Enchantress of the City, Heaven Defying Baby's Black-Bellied Father, search for the latest chapter. Yan Jishu looked at him deeply, his eyes like a bottomless abyss. However, in the blink of an eye, he started crying again, little Shengsheng, you're so ruthless. I had my heart set on the moon, but the moon shines on the ditch. How can I not compare to that stinky man? He wiped his tears and sobbed, I know my husband's heart is like iron and can't be changed. Now, I only hope to leave another beautiful memory with little Shengsheng. Little Shengsheng, you won't even agree to such a small request, will you? Ling Yusheng said expressionlessly, you can't enter that cave alone? You need 2 people? That's why you asked those people to go down with you? Yan Jishu glared at him and said, annoying. How can these stinky men compare to you, little Shengsheng? Ling Yusheng ignored him and arrived in front of the cave. The cave extended diagonally downwards, and it was bottomless. Ling Yusheng looked at Yan Jishu and asked, how do I get in? Yan Jishu said timidly, I don't know either. There's a bottomless abyss in front of this cave. I once tried to jump down alone, but I heard a voice saying that I wasn't the fated one. If I took another step forward, I would be killed. I was so scared that I could only retreat. Ling Yusheng sneered, so you want to find a few more scapegoats? You're so annoying. How can little Shengsheng say that? My heart is very pure and kind, okay? Yan Jishu looked like he had suffered a huge blow. His face was pale and he looked like he was on the verge of collapse. If it were anyone else, they would definitely be filled with tenderness and want to hug her in their arms to comfort her. However, Ling Yusheng ignored it completely. He stepped into the cave and jumped down before Yan Jishu could react. Ah! Yan Jishu was dazed. You jumped down just like that? Then, he covered his face with his slender hands and chuckled. Little Shengsheng, I really like you more and more. As soon as he said that, Yan Jishu disappeared. Ling Yusheng, who had jumped into the cave, heard a coarse and ancient voice that seemed to come from the distant sky. For thousands of lifetimes, fate will rise and fall. You are not from a foreign race. Please enter Wushang Palace to accept the test and gift. I only hope that Wushang's soul will remain in this world forever. A flame seemed to shoot up from the ground and engulfed Ling Yusheng. Then, he completely lost consciousness. Umo, the soup is ready. Come and drink some. Hearing the call from behind her, Lang Yumo retracted her gaze and frowned suspiciously. She didn't know why, but from the moment she entered the heaven-mixing cave, she always felt that a pair of eyes was secretly staring at her. Her divine sense was quite sharp. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't find anything. Could it be that it was just an illusion? Umo? The one who called out to her was a young man with thick eyebrows, big eyes, and fair skin. He was holding a bowl of steaming meat soup in his hand. Seeing Lang Yuma looking over, he blushed and handed over the soup in his hand with an expectant look on his face. This person's name was Lu Juanjia, the great-grandson of Lu Qianyuan, the leader of the Life Alliance, one of the 3 alliances of the floating island. When Ling Yuma first entered the floating island, she had accidentally saved Lu Juanjia once. But at that time, Ling Yuma didn't know Lu Juanjia's true identity, so she didn't take it to heart. However, he didn't expect that he would run into Lu Juanjia again after entering the heaven-mixing cave. Chapter 3507. The last time Lu Juanjia was in trouble, it was because he believed in bandits and was almost poisoned to death. This time, when he entered the chaotic heaven cave, he was tricked again and pushed into the 9-tailed dragon sunflower bush. After listening to Lu Juanjia's story, Ling Yuma was speechless. How could there be such a silly and sweet Lu Juanjia in the world? What a waste of his identity as the great-grandson of the Life Alliance master. Hearing Lang Yuma's complaints, Lu Juanjia smiled foolishly, without any resentment or remorse. But I think it's good now. If I hadn't been tricked by them, I wouldn't have entered the chaotic heaven cave, and I wouldn't have been able to reunite with Yuma. Lang Yuma secretly shook her head. All right. It seemed that this silly and sweet person was hopeless. He took a sip of the hot soup. It was fragrant and the meat was soft and tender. It melted in his mouth. Lang Yuma couldn't help but praise, the meat soup you cooked tastes really good. Although it was not as good as Xiaowu's, it was really good compared to ordinary people. Lu Juanjia's eyes lit up when he heard that. His fair cheeks blushed and he stammered, Yuma, it's good that you like it. I can cook for you every day. Lang Yuma raised her head and saw that the man opposite her had his head lowered, his face full of shyness and joy. His eyelashes fluttered, and his cheeks seemed to be stained with peach blossoms. Lang Yuma stared blankly, and before she knew it, another face appeared in front of her. His eyes were as clear as water. He blushed easily. He was obviously a little monk, but he kept saying, Amitba, and female benefactor, like an old man. However, when that person smiled, he was as crystal clear as a child, as if he could gather the cleanest and purest light in the world on his body. Little by little, her heartstrings were teased, and she unknowingly fell in love. Unknowingly, her feet were deep in the mud. Lu Juanjia felt that the opposite person's eyes were on him. His heart was beating wildly, and his face was as red as a cooked prawn. Why was Yuma staring at him? Did she have a good impression of him? When Lu Juanjia thought of this, he felt overjoyed. Suppressing her shyness, she looked up and stammered, Yuma, after we get out of the heaven-mixing cave this time, you come back to the Life Alliance with me, okay? I'll introduce you to my great-grandfather. Lang Yuma came back to her senses and heard his words clearly. She could not help but ask suspiciously, why do you want to introduce him to your great-grandfather? I don't even know him. Lu Juanjia's face turned even redder. Her eyes were sparkling and filled with anticipation. I want to tell grandfather that I want to marry. Before he could finish, Lang Yuma's expression suddenly changed. He abruptly threw away the bowl in his hand, grabbed Lu Juanjia's collar, and flew into the sky. In the next moment, a ferocious beast leaped out of the water and pounced toward the island where the two of them were originally. Yes, Lang Yuma and Lu Juanjia were currently on a boundless ocean. However, this sea was a little different from the sea in reality. Every so often, there would be a small island floating on the surface of the water. Some of these islands were planted with trees, while others were bare like reefs. They could only be used as a foothold. Fortunately, there were these small islands, so Lang Yuma and Lu Juanjia could move forward. Otherwise, they would definitely exhaust their spiritual power and die on the sea. However, there were very fierce and huge sea beasts in the sea that would often attack the two of them who were resting on the island. For example, at this moment, there was a huge black tortoise that was staring at Lang Yuma and Lu Juanjia with bloodthirsty and fierce eyes. Chapter 3508. This black tortoise's cultivation was much higher than theirs. It could already stand shoulder to shoulder with sea-splitting realm cultivators. The scariest thing was that its body was extremely huge. When it came out of the water, it was even bigger than the small island. Its long neck stretched out and bit the place where the two of them were just a moment ago. With a cracking sound, the small island actually split from the middle. Lu Juanjia was carried by Lang Yuma's shoulder in the air. Seeing this scene, his face turned pale. If it wasn't for Lang Yuma's vigilance, they would have been bitten into pieces like the rocks on the small island. Yuma, thank you. If it wasn't for? Shoo! Silence. Lang Yuma's expression was cold as she shouted. At the same time, she released her divine sense without holding back. On the red lotus soul-stealing saber in her hand, the lotus runes flickered with a dazzling light, faintly discernible. The huge black tortoise below seemed to realize that its prey had escaped. At this moment, it angrily raised its head and stared at the two with bloodthirsty eyes. Suddenly, the black tortoise's head stretched out. Ah! Lu Juanjia only felt a chill on his feet and screamed in fright. Fortunately, Lang Yuma noticed that something was wrong and quickly flew up several feet, narrowly avoiding the black tortoise's attack. However, Lu Juanjia's shoes fell into the sea. A cold tide came from the soles of his feet, almost scaring Lu Juanjia out of his wits. Lang Yuma also had lingering fears. She didn't expect the black tortoise's head to be so high. Suddenly, her mind was filled with an extremely uneasy premonition. Her divine sense clearly didn't detect anything, but Lang Yuma felt that something was wrong. Without hesitation, she activated all the spiritual power in her body and poured it into the red lotus soul-stealing saber. Bang! The blade struck the void, but a huge rebounding force came from it. Lang Yuma flew back dozens of meters. Her internal organs were overturned, and she almost spat out blood. At the place where the saber struck, a fierce beast that looked like a flood dragon slowly appeared. It was staring greedily at the two with a pair of green eyes. This flood dragon's skin was silver blue. Following the movement of its long tail, its figure slowly disappeared. It was not just a disappearance of sight, but also a disappearance of hearing and spiritual sense that could not be detected. Lang Yuma didn't even have time to wipe the blood from the corner of her mouth before she once again raised the red lotus soul-stealing blade. But her heart sank little by little. This flood dragon was stronger than Black Tortoise. It was so strong that she could not sense its real strength. When the Black Tortoise saw the flood dragon, it was so scared that it dived into the sea and didn't dare to come out again. Lang Yuma instinctively felt that she would die here. Lu Juanjia said with a trembling voice, Will we die here? Yuma, it's all my fault. You, throw me into the sea and run away. Shut up! Lang Yuma roared and slashed with the long saber in her hand. The blazing flames drew a beautiful arc in the air. However, it didn't hit. She couldn't find any trace of the flood dragon. A cold and damp aura, mixed with a pungent fishy smell, slowly surrounded the two of them. When Lang Yuma finally sensed the location of the flood dragon, it was the moment when he opened his bloody mouth, revealing his sharp teeth and greedy eyes. Even Lang Yuma's eyes showed despair. But it was only for a moment. That bit of weakness was replaced by a determination without regret. She released Lu Juanjia's hand without hesitation and let him fall into the sea. Chapter 3509. The red flame turned into a lotus, and the figure of the woman in red merged with the long saber. Lang Yuma's eyes were filled with determination. Since there was no way out, she had to fight with her life on the line. Even if there were no bones left, at least she did not cower. The flood dragon slowly revealed its body that covered the sky. It looked at the lowly human who dared to resist and revealed a mocking expression. Its huge claws stretched out, and in an instant, it could grab the weak body and crush it into meat paste. It liked to listen to the mournful wails of its prey in its claws and mouth. However, just as the flood dragon's claws were about to stretch out, its body suddenly froze. Its huge eyeballs moved stiffly. Finally, it landed in front of Lang Yuma. A little monk wearing a golden-red kasaya had appeared there. A pair of pitch-black, bottomless eyes was quietly looking at it. The golden alms bowl in his hand emitted a faint light. The flood dragon's body instinctively trembled. It had a fear of the golden alms bowl from the depths of its soul. Amitba, the little monk softly said. A cinnabar dot quietly appeared between his eyebrows. It made the originally pure, and holy face inexplicably have a bit of evil aura that made people tremble. The deep sonorous voice of the Buddhist Dharma flowed out from his opened and closed lips. A red light shot out from the golden alms bowl and directly pierced the flood dragon's eyebrows. A mournful scream resounded through the sky. The seawater below violently surged, setting off raging waves. The huge beasts under the sea desperately hid in the depths of the sea. They were as quiet as cicadas in winter, shivering in fear. Finally, the body of the screaming dragon disappeared, and there was a small silver-blue snake in the golden alms bowl of the little monk. However, it only lasted for a moment before it disappeared into the golden alms bowl. The little monk slowly turned around and looked at the pale girl with bloodstains at the corner of her mouth. He slightly lowered his head and said, "Amitba, Benefactor Lang, are you all right?" Before he could finish his sentence, he saw the body of the person in front of him sway slightly. She directly fell into the sea. Yuma. The little monk's expression changed. Without thinking, he rushed over and hugged her. "Are you badly injured?" Jing Yuan did not realize that his voice was trembling in panic. However, as soon as he said that, he realized that something was wrong. The girl in his arms looked at him with a faint smile. Although he was indeed injured, it wasn't to the point where he couldn't even fly. "Little monk, when did you start following me in secret?" Jing Yuan's face instantly turned red. After a long while, he stammered, "Little monk, I'm not." Halfway through his sentence, he realized that he was still hugging Lang Yuma. Their bodies were so close to each other. He was so close that he could clearly feel her warmth. There was also the feeling of his fingertips hugging her tightly. Even if they were separated by clothes, it was impossible to ignore. Jing Yuan hurriedly tried to loosen his grip. I was rude." Unexpectedly, Lang Yuma grabbed his clothes and said weakly, "My spiritual power has been exhausted. Are you going to throw me into the sea if you let go of me?" Jing Yuan, who was about to let go, suddenly tightened his grip. This time, it was too tight. It was so tight that it seemed like it wanted to directly knead people into its bones and blood. Lang Yuma could not help but groan. Jing Yuan's face, which was already red, seemed to be burning. At the same time, he could not suppress his rapid heartbeat and heavy breathing. Chapter 3510. Remember in 1 second, 800 $say net. There was no pop-up window for free reading. Lang Yuma saw that he was at a loss. He didn't know why, but her mood, which had been suppressed for a few days, became incomparably happy at this moment. She burst out laughing. "If you want to put me down, you have to bring me to an island or land so that I can have my feet on the ground and recuperate, right?" Jing Yuan pursed his lips. He held her firmly with both hands and landed on the island. Yuma, are you okay?" When the two of them landed, Lu Juanjia also climbed out of the sea. Seeing that Lang Yuma was safe and sound, tears almost flowed out of his eyes. He really thought that the two of them were going to be buried in the sea. Lu Juanjia's voice stopped abruptly. He stared at Jing Yuan, who was carrying Lang Yuma, with his eyes wide open. He was stunned for a long time before he stammered, How can you carry Miss Yuma? Put her down quickly." Jing Yuan slightly lowered his eyes, concealing the divine light in the bottom of his eyes. The hand that was carrying Lang Yuma let go and carefully placed her on the ground. Only then did Lu Juanjia realize that the person who was carrying Lang Yuma was a monk. Thus, the jealousy and anger in his heart mostly disappeared. He crawled to Lang Yuma's side and asked nervously, "Yuma, are you okay?" I'm sorry, I'm too useless. If it wasn't for protecting me, you might have been able to escape alone and wouldn't have been injured. Hearing Lu Juanjia's words, Jing Yuan's hand that was holding the golden alms bowl slightly tightened. His thin lips were pursed into a straight line. Lu Juanjia had already taken out a silk handkerchief and wanted to wipe the blood at the corner of Lang Yuma's mouth. Lang Yuma avoided it and suddenly raised her head and called out, "Little monk." Jing Yuan turned around and looked over. His gaze inadvertently swept past Lu Juanjia, who was very close to her. In the next moment, his pupils suddenly shrank. Because he saw Lang Yuma's hand pressing on the back of Lu Juanjia's neck in an extremely familiar and natural manner. A wave of hostility that he had not felt for a long time rose from the depths of his heart. It was almost about to turn into a monstrous anger that completely engulfed his rationality. This fellow is too much of a hindrance. However, Lang Yuma's next sentence startled him. Do you have any way to send him to a safe place first? Then, we can think of a way to bring him out of the chaotic heaven cave together. I don't want to. Lu Juanjia panicked. How can I leave you behind? Lang Yuma glanced at him, who was the one who said that he was a burden to me. Are you not leaving because you want to continue staying here and drag me down? Lu Juanjia revealed an ashamed expression. Then, he couldn't help but say, since this master can send me to a safe place, he can also send you there. Yuma, can we leave this place together? I'll take you back to see my great-grandfather. Lang Yuma shook her head expressionlessly. No, my senior and junior brothers are still in the chaotic heaven cave abode. When I was fighting with the flood dragon just now, although it was extremely dangerous, I sensed a familiar aura when the sea churned. Maybe my fellow disciples are nearby. How can I leave without finding them? Most importantly, how is she going to woo the little monk if this naive fellow stayed here? That's right. Meeting Jing Yuan again this time, Lang Yuma had already made up her mind. Fuck his rules and precepts, she regretted not meeting him earlier. Lang Yuma had lived for more than 20 years, but this was the first time she felt moved. Since God let her meet and reunite with the little monk, it meant that they were destined to be together. So what if he was a monk? Chapter 35:11. Remember in 1 second, 800 $say net there was no pop-up window for free reading. A monk could also return to asceticism. Which heavenly Tao stipulated that a monk could not fall in love and get married. Lang Yuma's mind was full of thoughts, but her face was serious and abnormally serious. A pair of deep eyes made Lu Juanjia lower his head guiltily. He no longer dared to be unreasonable. Lang Yuma then looked at Jing Yuan with a pleading look in her eyes. Little monk, can you do it? She was calculating in her mind. If the little monk said that he couldn't do it, or that he didn't want to be alone with her, she would have to think of some reason to send the third wheel away. Well, she had heard the word third wheel from Bai Xie. As for whether the little monk could do it or not, Lang Yuma didn't think about this question at all. Jing Yuan quickly gave her an answer. Amitba, please wait a moment. As soon as he finished speaking, another slender and powerful hand had already replaced Lang Yuma's hand, grabbed Lu Juanjia's collar, and disappeared. Lang Yuma blinked her eyes. Why did she feel that the little monk sounded so happy just now? Was it an illusion? Lang Yuma pursed her lips and secretly curled up the corners of her mouth. She took out a healing elixir and swallowed it, then sat cross-legged and meditated. In fact, what he said to Lu Juanjia was not entirely a lie. During the battle with the flood dragon, she did hear a distant and hazy voice. There seemed to be a familiar aura coming from the bottom of the sea. At this time, she meditated with rapt attention, and the surroundings became quiet. That voice once again came to her ears. Red Lotus soul-stealing evil spirit, Wu Shang soul-breaking sorrow, I only hope that the soul of Wu Shang will stay in the world forever. Wu Shang Palace. This was the old voice that she had heard in Wu Shang Palace. Could it be that there was also a Wu Shang Palace at the bottom of the sea in the Heaven Chaos Cave abode? Lang Yuma suddenly opened her eyes. Then she saw a pair of pitch-black eyes. The little monk was about to grab her hand. She didn't know whether he was healing her or checking her physical condition. But because Lang Yuma woke up and her body suddenly leaned forward, the distance between the two suddenly became extremely close. Lang Yuma could feel the man's warm and moist breath on her lips. Everything around them seemed to have quietened down. Just like that, the two of them held hands and stared into each other's eyes. Lang Yuma said softly, "You're back so soon?" Only then did Jing Yuan come to his senses. He took a few steps back in a sorry state. It took him a long time to stabilize his mind. He lowered his eyes and said in a low voice, "Benefactor Lu is sleeping in a safe place. When a gap appears in the boundary of the cave abode, he will automatically leave this place." Who asked him? Lang Yuma chuckled. I mean, why did you rush back in such a hurry? Even his breathing was a little labored? Is it because you're worried that I'll be in danger here? Jing Yuan's face blushed all the way to his ears. The more Leng Yuma looked at the little monk's embarrassed look, the more she liked him. She propped up her cheeks and admired the little monk's handsome eyes and delicate and flawless skin. She softly said, "Hey, little monk, that day outside the soul cultivation pool, I clearly saw you come back. Why did you suddenly run away? Did you really come here just to talk nonsense with me?" Jing Yuan lowered his eyes and said nothing. Leng Yuma was a little disappointed. "Did you really come here just to talk nonsense with me?" Jing Yuan raised his head and glanced at her. He tried to look calm, but his tight hands on his side betrayed his current mood. "Is the man who is hugging you your real husband?" Chapter 35:12. In just 1 second, he had memorized it all. There was no pop-up window for free reading. Leng Yuma was stunned. A man in a hug? Which man? Suddenly, she came back to her senses. "You mean Xiao Qi? Pfft, how could he be my husband? He's our Xiaoyao school's junior brother. When I first joined the Xiaoyao sect, he was still a little kid who hadn't reached adulthood yet. If I choose anyone as my husband, I won't eat the tender grass next to my nest, right?" Jing Yuan raised his head and looked at her in the eyes. He thought to himself, so that man is not Yumo's lover, but her junior brother. It was something that had nothing to do with him. But he couldn't stop the corner of his mouth from curling up. Leng Yuma looked at his expression that seemed to have dissipated. She suddenly thought of something and a big smile blossomed on her face. "Little monk, you left without saying goodbye that day. Could it be that you're jealous?" "No. I? Jing Yuan was speechless and flustered. He didn't know if he should deny it or refute it. The blush on his fair and tender face didn't fade. For the first time, Leng Yuma experienced what Bai Xie said, her heart exploded like fireworks. She had always been carefree and didn't know what it was to be shy. At this moment, she pursed her lips and lowered her head. She didn't know what to say. Rumble, a voice that spoiled the mood came from her stomach. Leng Yuma's body stiffened. She was so depressed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in. What the hell? It wasn't easy for her to leave a good impression on the little monk. But she came here to embarrass herself. It was all that stupid turtle's fault. Couldn't he wait until she was full before coming here? Leng Yuma coughed and wanted to change the topic. But when she raised her head, she saw Jing Yuan's gentle and shy eyes. The little monk said in a low voice, "Wait for me." Wait for him? Leng Yuma looked at him in a daze. The little monk formed a sword with his fingers and slashed at the sea. The next moment, a wave appeared on the sea. A few fat fish and prawns floated up and landed beside them. Jing Yuan took out a fire crystal furnace from his storage space and boiled a pot of water. His hands were already neatly processing the fish and prawns. "Jing Yuan, what are you doing?" Leng Yuma quickly stopped him. Aren't you a monk?" Jing Yuan raised his head to look at her, his long eyelashes fluttering, revealing a somewhat puzzled expression. Leng Yuma was stunned by the handsome face in front of her. After a while, she swallowed her saliva and said, "Aren't monks not allowed to kill?" Jing Yuan chuckled. "My sect doesn't have such a rule. Master himself is a vegetarian, but he doesn't force us. Although I haven't eaten meat for many years since I joined the sect, I can still prepare it for you." Leng Yuma slowly loosened her grip. She watched as the little monk skillfully processed the fish and obediently waited at the side. "Little monk. If your master doesn't force you to be a vegetarian, then can you marry and have children?" Jing Yuan's hand that was processing the fish paused. After a long while, he said in a voice so low that it was almost inaudible, This little monk doesn't know. No one in the temple has ever married and had children." Leng Yuma smiled, and her voice carried a softness and expectation that had never been heard before. "Then why don't you go back and ask? What if your master agrees to you marry? If he doesn't agree, then you can beg him?" Jing Yuan lowered his head so that no one could see his expression. However, his exposed ears were so red that they seemed to be dripping water. Chapter 35:13. Just when Leng Yuma thought that he would not answer, she heard the little monk whisper, Leng Yuma felt that there were 10,000 fireworks blooming in her heart. She really wanted to jump up and shout at the sea in front of her. She wanted to dance for joy to vent the joy in her heart. Reserved. Leng Yuma, you must be reserved. What if the little monk that she finally caught was scared away? When she finally calmed down, she saw the little monk's pair of slender, well-proportioned, jade-like hands that were usually not stained with blood, handling the smelly and dirty fish and prawns. She was reluctant to part with him. She grabbed the little monk's hand. "Don't cook, I have dry rations, I can deal with it." Even if the little monk's hands were not chanting, they should be clean without being shrouded in Buddha's light. How could he handle these smelly fish and prawns? Jing Yuan raised his head and looked at her. His long eyelashes drooped. Even if he tried his best, he could not stop the corners of his mouth from curling up. Little monk. Before I became master's disciple, I wandered alone for many years. These are the things that I can do. After a pause, he said, my skills are not bad. In the future, I can also cook for you every day. You don't have to eat other people's cooking. Lang Yuma was stunned for a while before she reacted. Jing Yuan repeated what Lu Juanjia said before. It turned out that he was not only protecting her from afar. He even heard the conversation between her and Lu Juanjia. Not only did he hear it, he was also jealous. Lang Yuma even had a sweet smile on her face. Okay, I will only eat little monk's cooking in the future. Jing Yuan's face became even redder. The curve of his mouth became even higher. The sunlight fell on the side of his face, illuminating the little monk's white and crimson skin. He was obviously a man, but his skin was better than hers. There was not a single flaw on his face. How could there be such a handsome, shy, and adorable little monk in this world? Every strand and every inch seemed to be tailor-made according to his wishes. An impulse came to her mind. Lang Yuma suddenly leaned over and lightly kissed the little monk's face. Jing Yuan stopped what he was doing and raised his head abruptly. Those pitch-black eyes stared at her in a daze. From clear to murky. From confusion to passion. Being stared at by those eyes, Lang Yuma's face started to burn up. She suppressed her shyness and panic, turned her head, and avoided the man's gaze. What are you looking at? If you don't look at the fire, the water will dry up. However, even if he didn't turn around to look, that scorching gaze didn't leave his body for even a moment. Just when Lang Yuma couldn't take it anymore and was about to turn around, the ground beneath his feet shook violently. What happened? Lang Yuma was startled. Then, she felt a pair of strong hands around her waist, and her body suddenly rose into the air. The island below, which had already been bitten apart by the black tortoise, was now crumbling. Lang Yuma exclaimed, "You made fish soup." He heard a low chuckle. This time, the small monk's voice was no longer pure and holy. Instead, it was an inexplicable deep magnetism that was like a feather tickling one's heart. Lang Yuma only felt her ears heat up. Then, she saw the fish soup, along with the fire crystal pot, fly into the small monk's sleeve. The correct chapter of Alluring Enchantress, Heaven-Defying Baby's Black-Bellied Father will continue to be updated on Qingdou. There will be no advertisements on the site. Everyone, please bookmark and recommend Qingdou. Chapter 35:14. Jing Yuan said gently, "Aren't you going to look for your fellow apprentices? I see that your saber has the aura of Wushang Palace. This sea region is shaking, which is a sign that Wushang Palace is about to open. Are you unwilling to leave the sea region because you want to find the entrance to Wushang Palace?" Lang Yuema looked at Jing Yuan in admiration. Back when they were in the soul cultivation pool, she already knew that the little monk was not simple, but she didn't expect him to be so complicated. Oh, he was pleasing to the eye and powerful. As expected of the man she fancied. Being stared at by her undisguised gaze, Jing Yuan's thin face blushed again. But this time, he didn't let go of the person in his arms in a panic. Instead, he hugged her tighter. "There are many dangerous checkpoints in Wushang Palace. Can I accompany you?" Lang Yuma searched for his slender hand. Under the little monk's bewildered gaze, she interlocked her fingers with his. "What's there to ask? It wasn't easy for me to catch you. Do you think I'll allow you to escape?" The island below sank to the bottom of the sea, but a huge whirlpool appeared on the surface of the sea. A huge pulling force came from below. The two of them did not resist and dived into the sea. Lang Yuma's ears once again rang with a familiar and distant old voice. It was like a call and a prayer from ancient times. 1,000 lifetimes and 100 lifetimes, the rise and fall of fate. Touched by your hot-bloodedness, I invite you to enter Wushang Palace to accept the test and gift. Mu Yen, be careful. Ningyu shouted and rushed over, wanting to pull the figure that was falling into the abyss. However, he was still a step too late. Disregarding everything, his outstretched hand only grabs the corner of Mayan's clothes. With a tearing sound, the figure fell straight down into the abyss. Ningyu jumped down without a second thought. In the end, he crashed into a barrier. Before Ningyu could figure out what had happened, the ground, which had cracked open for no reason, slowly closed again. The magical plants were still attacking her with their leaves. Everything seems to be no different from when Mayan was suddenly swallowed up by the rift. Ningyu's expression darkened. She waved her hand and chopped the demonic plants around her into pieces. She stood in the same place for a long time before slowly lowering her head to look at the bell hanging on her waist. Jun Mayan can't die. He had to leave the Chaos Heaven abode immediately and return to the Ning family. Ningyu frowned, suddenly grabbed the blood vein bell and threw it into the air. The flying bell made a pleasant tinkling sound. As it flew higher and higher, a red light was emitted from the bell. The surrounding air rippled like the surface of a lake with a stone thrown into it. Ningyu flew up and entered the ripples in the air, slowly disappearing. Ningyu's figure slowly appeared in the nine-tailed dragon sunflower field. Realizing that she had indeed come out of the heaven mixing cave unscathed, she breathed a long sigh of relief. Master! Master! You felt it too, right? There's the aura of yin-yang twin hearts down there. Moreover, Mei Yanyan and the others seem to be inside as well. Waha, that's great. Mei Yanyan is indeed Master's strongest luck. A strange and excited voice came from the flower field, causing Ningyu to turn her head to look. She almost sucked in a breath of cold air when she saw what it was. She saw a young man wearing a crescent moon robe standing in the middle of the golden flower field. It's not that Ningyu hadn't seen handsome men in the past. But compared to the person in front of her, it's really like comparing fireflies to the bright moon, or rubble to beautiful jade. Chapter 35:15. She was elegant and graceful, like a celestial being. Could there really be a man in this world who was so beautiful that he could shake people's hearts and minds? Ningyu was in a trance. She heard the shrill voice ring out again, Master, Master, what are you doing? Why don't we go to the Heaven Chaos Cave? Do you want to avoid meeting Mei Yanyan again? I don't know who came all the way to this damn place before he recovered. Besides, didn't you just hear? It's very dangerous in the Heaven Chaos Cave. Aren't you afraid that Mei Yanyan and the others will be in danger? Ningyu didn't realize it until now. The one who spoke was a very strange spiritual pet on the young man's shoulder. The man, who was expressionless just now, couldn't help frowning slightly after hearing the last words of the spiritual pet. A trace of worry flashed across his eyes. For the first time, Ningyu knew that a man's frown could make people's hearts tighten and make them want to give all the treasures in the world to him. It sounded like this person was worried about someone trapped in the chaotic heaven cave abode. She had just come out of there. Maybe she could provide him with some help. Thinking of this, Ningyu couldn't help stepping forward, ready to strike up a conversation. However, the next moment, she saw a flash of light and shadow in front of her. The young man and the strange spiritual pet on his shoulder disappeared without a trace. Ningyu suddenly beat her chest and stamped her feet. Ah! A peerlessly handsome man. He didn't even get a chance to say a word before he brushed past him. First miss, you came out of the heaven mixing cave mansion so soon? It wasn't until the voice of her personal maid came to her ears that Ningyu came to her senses and let out a long sigh. Alas, forget it. No matter how beautiful the handsome man was, it was not as important as Mayan. She had to go home and report to her father as soon as possible. Miss, are you going back to the main family? The little maid Qin Kei, who was disguised as a man like Ningyu, but her real gender could be seen at a glance, showed a surprised expression when she heard Ningyu's plan. Miss, didn't you say that if you don't reach the peak of the sea-splitting realm, you will always be outside to gain experience and not go back to the main family? Ningyu shook her head and said, plans can't keep up with changes. This time, something happened in the Heaven Chaos Cave, and I must inform my father as soon as possible. What is more urgent than Mrs. Goal? The Blue Sparrow was even more baffled. She knew her young Mrs. character very well. He was famous for being stubborn in many aspects, especially when it came to cultivation. Back then, she made a bet with her master that she would not return to the Ning family until she reached the peak of the sea-splitting realm. No matter how dangerous it was, no matter how much hardship he had to endure outside, he would never go back. But now, they were going back to the main family? What exactly happened in the chaotic heaven cave mansion? Ningyu gently stroked the blood-striped bell on her waist and said in a low voice, in the heaven mixing cave, someone touched the blood-striped bell, but did not suffer any backlash. She even left her spiritual chi mark on the blood-striped bell. What? Qin Kei suddenly widened her eyes and revealed an extremely shocked expression. Miss, you mean? The corner of Ningyu's mouth curled up, her eyes showing some doubt and expectation. The blood pattern bell. Even in the main Ning family, only the purest bloodline can touch it. Not to mention the side branches, even those cousins with mixed bloodlines would be hurt and rejected by the blood pattern bell. Only those who truly belong to the direct bloodline of the Ning family could touch the blood pattern bell without suffering any backlash. The error-free chapter of Chapter 35:16. I suspect that there is still a direct descendant of the Ning family in this world. Without waves and waves, the vast golden spear leaves the dead, the mandate of heaven, the nod of fate, welcome, bang. Her body falls heavily to the ground, interrupting the heavy sound in her ears. Mu Yen touches her confused head from the fall and tries her best to get up from the ground. She touches her nose with lingering fear, and steps on the ground under her feet. The ground is not hard bluestone, but soft like a mattress. Fortunately, it is soft and elastic. Otherwise, she would be caught off guard and unable to use her spiritual power. Even if she doesn't fall to her death, she will definitely be disfigured. But what is this ground made of? As she gets closer, she can smell a strange aroma of food, making people unable to help but want to eat. The little chick is already happily bouncing and rolling on the ground. Huang Huang. Hearing Mu Yan's call, the little chick rolls back, raises its head, and opens its big eyes. Gujiji. Mom, are you calling Huang Huang? Mu Yan, did you hear a voice mentioning Wushang Palace just now? The little chick tilts its head. Did I? I think I did. Mu Yan picks it up, looks around, and asks, Wushang Palace, don't you have any impression of this name? Did you forget where you came from? Gujiji? The little chick blinks its big eyes, looking confused. Gujijigu, Gujijiji. Huang Huang is Mom's son, of course Mom and Dad gave birth to it. Mu Yan's mouth twitches. She really wants to tell this stupid chicken that she and Di Mingju are people, and no matter what, they can't give birth to a chicken. But when she meets those clear eyes, she swallows it back. Fine. A chicken son is a chicken son. Anyway, she has raised all kinds of naughty children, it doesn't matter if she has a chicken. Mu Yan puts the little chick down and lets it play on its own, while she begins to explore the surroundings. Obviously, this is a palace. But the layout is very strange. The ground is soft, and there are strange things that smell delicious. The tables, chairs, and even the windows in the room seem to exude a strong sweet fragrance. Crack. A strange sound could be heard. Mu Yan turned around and saw that the little chick had bitten off a corner of the table and was happily munching on it. Huang Huang, what are you eating? Mu Yan is startled. Isn't this stupid son of mine a little too open-minded? How dare they eat and drink in a place like this? Littling Hua, GGG, AO. Mommy, this is delicious. It's so sweet, you should eat it too. Saying that, he uses his little wings to forcefully break off another corner of the table and hands it to Mu Yan. Mu Yan takes it with a frown. She looks at it suspiciously, then brings it close to her nose and sniffs it. A rich, sweet aroma of pastries wafted over. But it was different from the pastries she had eaten before. Crack. Crack. Littling Hua ate even more happily, calling out, "This is too delicious." It made Mu Yan's stomach rumble, and she couldn't help but want to have a taste. However, at this moment, the sound of hurried footsteps came from afar. Mu Yan's heart trembled, and she shouted, "Huang Huang, come back." Before she could finish speaking, the door was already smashed open. Several tall figures rushed in, and the one in the lead grabbed the little chick, then turned around and left. Wah! Chapter 35:17. Let me go. Mom, save me, save me. Mu Yan is shocked. She soars into the air, trying to catch the little chick, put the chicken down. The tall man holding the little chick turns back and slaps his palm. Bang! The two forces collide, and Mu Yan takes several steps back. By the time she managed to regain her footing and was about to chase after them, the figures and the little chick had already disappeared down the long walkway. She can still vaguely hear the little chick's mournful screams in the distance. Gugagugagigigigigi. Scoundrel, let me go. I want my mom, I want my mom. Mu Yan massages her numb arm, her brows tightly knit together. Just now, if she's not mistaken. Those who took away the little chick don't seem to be human. But, humanoid puppets? Who let them take Huang Huang? What do they want? The turbulent spiritual power in her body slowly calms down after adjusting her breathing. Mu Yan doesn't hesitate anymore and immediately chases along the corridor. However, the end of the corridor is a dead end. It was a thick wall without any traps. Rumble. The ground under her feet shakes violently, and a terrible sound comes from behind. Mu Yan turned around and saw a huge boulder that almost filled the entire walkway rapidly rolling towards her. Fuck. This is cutting off her escape route. Qiju unsheathes his sword and slashes at the wall in front of him, but the wall doesn't move. He slashes at the boulder rolling behind her, but it doesn't slow down at all. The rolling boulder is getting closer and closer to her. 10, 9, 8, 7, it's not that there's no way, but in a short time, she can't even use her Shin musician skills. Jun Mu Yan, step back? Qi Huang's cold voice comes to her ears. Then, a tall figure in red appears in front of Mu Yan's eyes. A thick black fog was vaguely emitted from his body. Boom! After a loud noise, a hole is broken in the blue stone wall in front of her. But it's only a hole, and it begins to close again. Qi Huang turned around and pulled Mu Yan, directly passing through the hole. Mu Yan leans against the wall, gasping for breath. Seeing the youngster in red standing in front of her, she quickly says, "Qi Huang, go back to the space." The youth in front of him slowly turned around. His handsome face looked strangely pale in the dim light of the palace. But his thin lips were red as if they were smeared with blood. The corner of his mouth slowly hooks up, condescendingly looking at Mayan. "Go back? Why would I want to go back to that godforsaken place and continue living in isolation? 7 brilliances? Only then does Mu Yan discover that Qi Huang's current expression is very strange. Qi Xiaohuang was supposed to be arrogant, cocky, and conceited. He was definitely not as sinister, mocking, high and mighty as he seemed to loathe everything in the world. "Qi Huang, what happened?" Qi Huang stares blankly, his face revealing a pained expression. He mutters in a low voice, "Jun Mayan. It's me, hurry back to the Tian Mo Qin space." Qi Huang pressed his fingers against his temples, the veins on the back of his hands bulging. "Go back. I must go back, immediately," but very quickly, wisps of black energy curled around his body. The hand on his forehead slowly lowers, and Qi Huang's face shows a cold expression. "Jun Mayan, I really didn't expect that you could influence me to this extent. It seems that I can't let you live any longer." Mu Yan's pupils contract. An inexplicable shiver welled up in her heart, making her instinctively want to retreat. The error-free chapter of the Enchantress of the Magic Doctor, Heaven-Defying Baby's black-bellied father will continue to be updated on Qingdou. There are no advertisements on the site. Everyone, please collect and recommend Qingdou. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.